Welcome to the SRS Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron J. Babyar, and I'm the Training Director of Support Raising Solutions. Whether you're a new ministry worker or a veteran looking to increase your competence and confidence, Support Raising Solutions seeks to bless you in your quest to be a spiritually healthy, vision-driven, fully funded Great Commission worker.
My guest today is Jenn Fortner. Jenn is someone that has raised and lived and coached and trained on support raising for many years. And she currently lives in Springfield, Missouri. Of course, I'm in Northwest Arkansas. And we are sitting down today to have a discussion on why coaching is key. First of all, Jenn, before we get into all that, welcome, my friend. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Your first time, which actually rather surprises me. I would assume I would have had you on here several times by now, but thank you for finally joining us for at least your first time.
Oh, thanks for having me, Aaron. I'm really excited to be here.
Tell us a little bit about your family as well as your history with support raising, if you would, please.
Sure, yeah. So I am married to my wonderful husband, Zach Fortner, and we have two kids. Sloan is 3. She just turned 3 at the end of October. And Merrick is going to be 2 coming up soon. So yeah, we got the small kiddo factor going on and loving it, loving life. And my journey for support raising kind of started back right after I graduated from university. So back in 2004, I started working for an organization called the International House of Prayer in Kansas City. And I was a assistant to a guy in executive leadership. And one of his tasks was to talk to that mission space about support raising, and we did a training called Forerunner Partnership Development, and he would coach and train and do some of the intensives and teaching, and he had to travel a lot. So as his assistant, sometimes when he had to travel, he would give me tasks, and one of them was coaching his group that he did for partnership development, and sometimes some of the teaching. So I kind of got thrown into the fire as a young 21, 22-year-old, starting to teach and train in this area, and I'd been doing it myself for several years. And over the course of time, I started to do that more and more and getting more of a heart for it. And he said to me, Jenn, why don't you just take this over? I don't have time for it. And you're obviously passionate about this and good at it. So I started to do a lot of the coaching and the training for that organization, and did a lot of admin work for that particular organization. So just loved it. Really got a heart to see my friends win in the area of support raising and get their budgets fully raised. And I saw a lot of friends just sort of struggling to make it, not knowing how to raise their support, and was doing my own as well. And so just super passionate about it. And then I got engaged to my husband here in Springfield, moved from Kansas City to Springfield, and started working with Assemblies of God World Missions about 7 years ago now, as a fully dedicated support raiser trainer, and developed a curriculum here that we currently use today. So, and it's expanded and grown since I started, and absolutely love it. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. And what I've been doing this for probably the better part of 10 years now, a little longer than that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, your kids are the cutest. Of course, Marky and I are friends with you on Facebook, so we see your pictures pop up now and then. And I know that you stay very active in coaching ministry leaders. And in fact, briefly share your organization and a little bit about your coaching. You could go on and on because I know you're very experienced in this matter, and that's why we had you on today specifically for these topics. But tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah. So like I said, when I started with Eurasia there and the Assemblies of God World Missions, there was really nothing in place in the area of coaching. And there was a little bit of training for our mission space for a missionary that would start the process, but we didn't have anything that was immediate, and we did not have coaching. So I was kind of tasked with building something from the ground up and trying to figure out what we needed. And so I kind of started with a little bit of a workbook, of small group dynamic. And what I do now is I'm training around, I think right now I'm coaching / training I think it's 76, I think at the moment, of our missionaries. And I take the folks that are sort of on the ground floor of their journey, new staff, and I train them. And what I do is put them into small group cohorts, and we go through a training process that meets for an hour each week, using something like Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever, sort of virtual small group meeting. And then after that training is over and they sort of get the nuts and bolts that they need to start their journey in support raising, I become their coach and I call them on a regular basis. We set up every 2 weeks just because of the volume output that I've got with that 75 group. Not that I'm saying that that's the way to do it, but that's what I need to do for my capacity while in my schedule. And I call those folks every other week on the phone until they're at 100% and on their way to the field. So if you were going to India, Aaron, I would start with you from the very day that you got approved with Assemblies of God World Missions, and I would walk with you all the way through until you're at 100%. And right now, our missionaries take an average of, I think, 8.5 months to raise their funds. But a lot of the folks that I work with, and this is important to kind of note, if you're listening to me talk about coaching and training at all, that all of the missionaries that I work with have full-time jobs. They're in the midst and the throes of possibly, finishing out school, full-time jobs, family, that kind of stuff. So that's why it takes, that 8.5 average. But before I started, that average was around 12.5.
All right. Now I'm going to pause you here because you're getting into some minutia, which is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah.
It's good.
Sorry.
It's good for people to know. It's good for people to know. But I want to say this too. A lot of our listeners are coming from very different organizations, very different backgrounds, oftentimes different countries. And this is just simply your experience that would not be simple for everybody to wave a magic wand and replicate. This just happens to be what you've been able to put together with your organization and how you're able to serve. And I think one of the main points with it too is that one of the reasons you see your ministry leaders get fully funded is not just that they do Bible work, not just that they just read a book, not that they just get training. Those are all really important things. And you guys don't even do the SRS boot camps. You do your own training, which is fine. But the reality is what we're talking about today is it is that coaching aspect. And you and I both know, but I'm not so sure if our listeners all know, that most of the people that I know who are and stay fully funded, they had somebody coach them quite intensely at some point after they got their support raising training. Not everybody has to have it. And yet, Jenny, in your experience, wouldn't you agree that most people really benefit from having a coach?
Oh, I mean, that's probably an understatement, Aaron. I would say it's the key of what we do is the coaching. Obviously, the training, support raising boot camps, anything that you can do to get trained is 100% valuable. But taking it that next step further has made all of the difference in our organization.
And that's why I invited you on here today too, was just to talk about the coaching aspect of why get a coach. And I know we can get into all sorts of different things about how to get a coach. A lot of people, will say, talk to somebody who's been there, who's done that. Your organization might provide it for you. You might need to seek out a third party. Like, there's different ways of how to get a coach. We're not going to try and solve the how to get a coach today. Really want to get more to a basic level of why. Why is it needed? Why do you need to try and find one? And so, Jen, I think as someone that you get to interact so regularly all the time with people that have that need, I just thought you'd be the perfect person to speak into even the concept for somebody that it's new to. They're like, well, I paid for a boot camp. I did that. I should be able to raise my support, which again, that's going to work for some people, but for a lot of people, they're going to need that coach. So let's dig into that. So I'm just going to ask you just start unpacking a little bit of that for us today, as far as why getting that third party that's not a rookie, that's never even raised support before, but getting that third party to speak into it. Why is that so important, and how does that make a difference?
Yeah. So, one of the things that there's several things to highlight here. There's a lot of reasons why coaching is so valuable. I would say one that, let's just start here, is that the temptation kind of sneaks in easily after you've been trained to do things less relationally or take shortcuts. That's one of the reasons why coaching is so valuable, because you can keep those best practices in front of people and motivate them to stay on top of things. Stay on top of things, sure, an accountability piece, but it's also, I have seen so many missionaries like tempted to take shortcuts. Like, maybe I'm going to start texting people instead of calling. Maybe I don't want to do face-to-face appointments. I think all of a sudden that just going to a billion small groups is the way to do it. But I'm right there to tell them, hey, let's keep those best practices in mind. Let's keep those ways forward that are, kind of tried and true, instead of fancy ideas that may or may not pan out. So I think that's probably number one, just keeping those ways forward, and also that biblical basis in front of them, and asking the questions that lead to that understanding and help kind of develop that over time. Because if you go to a boot camp, you might get a download of all of that, but keeping that in front of you when things are tough, when you've had a hard week, that can be a challenge. But having somebody alongside of you can make all of the difference in keeping that focus and that perspective positive.
Well, and there's a blind spot issue, isn't there?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. There's so many blind spots that can happen. And, say that you're in the middle of the training and, you took a bathroom break or something happened and you missed a little bit of something valuable. It can actually change the course of how you get yeses or nos in your appointments. And just having somebody to troubleshoot with you through those things. That's funny you say that,
because I know that the support raising boot camps are, they're pretty intense. I've had a lot of people equate them to trying to drink from a fire hydrant. So I know there's a lot going on, but I have, like when Micah May was facilitating or something, I've stepped in the hallway briefly and I've seen somebody that's not in the room, and my heart breaks for them, because I'm like, you really need to be in there. Like, you really need to hear what he's training on right now. And I'm sure that, they always have great reasons, like, I needed a break, or I had to get a drink, or use the restroom, or, my daughter called, and so I get it. But yeah, it's impossible to go through a training. And again, the SRS boot camps are not the only type of training out there, but it's impossible to get a training and be like a computer that actually downloaded every little bit of information and it's at your fingertips and you just know it. It's not that way with support raising. It's not like this thing that there's this secret information and you get it all in 2 days and boom, you're done. You never need anything else, is it?
Yeah, and I can't tell you how many times I've coached somebody and I know, because I trained them myself, what we went over. But, there'll be a little lost in translation moment here and there. And coaching you have the ability to sort of go back through those items and say, this is why this is important, or this is why you need to do it this way. And longer conversations that can kind of help quell those, like I said, even just the temptations that are there to maybe take a shortcut, or maybe not do something the most relational way. Oh, I think I have this fancy idea because I saw somebody, ask for all of their support on Facebook. Well, I'm just going to try that because these face-to-face appointments are too hard or whatever. And a coach just keeps those things in check.
It's funny. You mentioned one right there. I'm going to jump on that because I think it's one of the more common ones I hear, where we train, at least at the SRS boot camps, we train people on how to do personal support raising presentations over coffee or lunch or, somebody's house, whatever. But so often I hear from people down the road, if I had a pre-existing relationship, where they start digging into, we'll say, old and less productive ways of support raising, be that speaking at churches or small groups, which I'm not saying you can't do those things. I'm not saying they don't work, but there's reasons why, if that's your primary support raising model you're trying to use, that can be kind of a rough way to go. And so true, Jen, where I'm like, I know I covered this. Like, I know I told them why that would really not be a good idea to spend lots and lots of time for a little teeny tiny little return. And I just had to go over it again. And so I think part of this, Jen, might be that people, they want to serve the Lord. They want to get to the mission that God has given them. They're very vision driven, but the ability to process the large amounts of information on how to really raise up a team of people to pray and partner with you. That's a skill set it's not like a quick download. It's not something you can do really quickly. You kind of need to hear the same things 3 or 4 different ways, 3 or 4 different times sometimes, right?
Yeah, well, and that's the way we all learn. I mean, if you just give me a book, I may retain, I don't know what the actual percentage is of, if you're reading
Mm-hmm.
something, how much you actually retain, versus when you hear something, spoken or whatever. But yeah, it kind of grabs those pieces that may be lost on somebody just because of the way the information was even presented to them, or maybe they just heard it one way, and it would be helpful, not only to hear it, but to read it. And it takes those kind of missing pieces and just kind of puts them together with somebody that can, encapsulate all
Right.
of that for you
Right.
and keep it in front of
Okay.
you.
What else about the whole why
Yeah.
someone could get a coach? Because I'm sure that some of our listeners right now are like, well, our organization doesn't really do that. They send us to a training, and they tell me I have to, have 10 appointments a week or 8 appointments a week. But that's accountability. That's different from coaching. So the coaching aspect, I think to some of our listeners, that might not be a concept that they've really ever applied to the support raising process. So Jen, why should someone seek out a coach, even if it's not being, prefabricated and handed to them and required of them, separate from accountability? Why do they really need to look
Mhm.
for a coach?
Yeah, there's a couple other, I think, easy things to say. And this might be a little redundant, but I think that it's important to distinguish this even different from a lot of like what we just talked about. A lot of things get lost in training. But number two, I would say as a coach, what I see over and over again is in support raising, there really is
Mm,
a lot of nuance, Aaron. Does
hmm.
that make sense? Just that word in and of itself, that nuance factor can be really helped by a coach
Hmm.
going with you with specific scenarios. So a lot of my coaching gets into, okay, I got this text message back, or I got this situation in front of me where I don't know what to do with this uncle that wants to give us a lot of cash support, but I want to talk to him
Right.
about monthly support. What do I say? So especially for somebody that's new, that's trying to figure out
Hmm.
their language and their wording, it can be so valuable to get into those specifics, and you just don't have the
Hmm.
ability to do that when you're just being trained. So somebody walking with you can kind of help through those nuances, and not even getting into, if I'm an ethnic minority, like I might have to do something a teeny bit different, or change things up a little bit to account for the differences culturally. Coaching can help with that. Scenarios come up, Aaron, in my conversations on a daily basis where just having somebody to touch base with and ask a quick question to
Yes.
can just be invaluable. So I get into those
Hmm.
nuancy type of discussions, like I said, daily.
I want to point out a resource that not all of our listeners have probably read. If you're eager to work hard to develop a solid, faithful support team to undergird your ministry for the long haul, you might want to pick up a copy of the book called Viewpoints. It's compiled and authored by Steve Shadrack, and this book called Viewpoints is filled with encouraging case studies and anecdotes that will encourage you in the support raising process. You can pick up Viewpoints at cmmpress.org, where you can receive a 10% discount if you use the code SRS Podcast.
I had an old friend that a Bible camp I worked at years ago, and they had asked me to help them some things. And so there's a guy I met a couple years ago that he's raising his support, and he works at that camp. So I've kind of summarized to say I've had a long-standing ministry relationship with this particular Bible camp, and I got kind of we'll call it a random phone call because I don't want to get into all the details of it. But basically, what was happening is this guy had the opportunity to sit down with a supporter that could potentially cover about 20% of his annual budget. And he just needed a little bit of guidance as far as how to say it, how to ask, how to respect the time, but also even acknowledge past gifts
Mhm.
and ask for clarity on future gifts, because there was a wonderful capacity, but what was missing is some sort of consistency of clarity of
Mhm.
intent. And quite honestly, it was a simple conversation for me to have with him, but for him, it was the first time that he was going to be having a conversation quite like that. And I believe it gave him not just the words, which I do believe it helped him with semantics, but I think it gave him the confidence to step boldly into that conversation with that ministry partner, and not feel like he's doing just a money grab, but clearly explaining how that partner's ongoing giving would help them continue to reach more kids for Jesus Christ. And so that was a coaching moment, so to speak, that, I believe we all need those. And sometimes they're just going to be more formal and less formal. But if you don't have anybody to call, if there's no one to reach out to, you might be left to your own devices and just prayer. And I don't mean to discount prayer, Jen, but experience sometimes and talking to people who have been there before, that helps quite a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I have the ability to see things kind of from, a different perspective because I am not the one that's raising their funds. So I get to see things, hold it a little bit more loosely, give them ideas, take the pressure off, and able to see things from a perspective that they may not have because they're so in it. They've got their own concerns, fears, all this other stuff going on, but I can simply sort of diffuse the, whatever question they have with an answer that they may not have thought of, because they're so in the middle of it. They're sort of right in front of their nose, but I can see things kind of farther out. So that's really helpful as well. And, I touched on this just a second ago, but the idea pool is really helpful too, because I am, as a coach, I'm seeing 75 different people walk through this in a similar time frame in their lives where there's sort of new staff coming on board, and I can kind of look at things and go, okay, this is working for this people, this way. Oh, you have this challenge of not a whole lot of contacts. Well, here's some ideas of how to expand, whatever it is with those nuancy type things. I've seen it from so many different angles that I can provide perspective that they may not have come to on their own.
Honestly, Jen, I think that's why organizations more and more are either using an internal coach or seeking an external coach. They're realizing that, hey, there's, read The God Ask. Absolutely. Read Funding Your Ministry by Scott Morton. Also, absolutely. Go to SRS Boot Camp or there are other internal trainings that organizations have, like, do all that. But that relational ability to have somebody who's thought about that, like you said, like that pool, like they've thought through the pool of all the different questions and answers that could probably come up, even if they haven't thought of all of them, they've walked far enough down that road, I'm sorry, I switched analogies from pools to road. They swam enough in that sea that it's a lot simpler for them to help you not only process it, but understand it to the point of application.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I know that we're moving towards the end of this podcast, Jen. So I know that you probably had a couple more thoughts. So I just kind of want to defer to you before we wrap up. What other thoughts are behind the why someone really needs to get a coach?
Yeah, something comes to mind that we really haven't talked about yet, and that's just the area of like having somebody to share your wins and your wars with and provide encouragement. In those times or weeks that may be a little bit more challenging. I run into that on a regular basis. I was actually on vacation a couple weeks ago. I went to Florida with my husband, and we were having this beach day where I was basically just sitting in a chair with an umbrella, reading a book and relaxing. And I got this text message from one of my missionaries. And she's somebody that I've been working with for probably a little bit longer than usual. I'd say her and her husband just had a baby, and she's kind of in the throes of new motherhood. She's got a lot going on, and they're trying to get to the field by in a month from now. Okay. So, and they have about, I think, like $600 more in monthly support to raise and a substantial amount of cash. So they're trying to get all of this done. They just had a baby. There's a lot of, things, and we really have built up a friendship over time. So imagine me sitting at the beach, reading a book, and I get this text message from one of my missionaries, and she just says, I really need to talk right now. And I didn't even blink, and I called her because we've already built up that relationship. I'm excited to talk to her. And as soon as we get on the phone, she starts crying. because she's in a place where she knows that they need to be there in 3 weeks from now, and she's got a substantial amount of work ahead of her, and she's got the challenges of new motherhood. And I was able in that moment to provide the encouragement that she needs. And now they're at 100% and on their way. And that was only a few weeks ago. So I was able to give her ideas, but I was able to just listen to her as she cried and provide that encouragement that she needed to keep going. And I think she was in that I'm tired, I don't want to, keep going type of a moment. But it was really, Aaron, one of those God moments where I was actually standing in the water in the ocean, talking to her on the phone, feeling this wave of excitement and knowing that this is a God thing, that they are going to get there. But being able to provide the encouragement and the moment and she had the ideas, a lot of them herself. She just needed to talk to somebody. She needed to be on her side. And I think that's one thing with, support raising that it's easy for an organization to train somebody, and it is hard to provide coaching in some ways for some organizations. That can be a real challenge. But I would encourage any organization to try to seek out that piece if you can and figure out how to make that work, because I think that those moments for our workers, our missionaries, whoever it is that, your staff, it provides that level of community backing up. I don't know a better way to say that. And just the encouragement that they need to keep going and feel like their organization is right there with them. And so that's a privilege for me to do for Assemblies of God, and love building those relationships and having those times with my mission space.
Awesome. Leave it to Jenn to leave us to have a story of a changed life to help this all make sense at the end. Great job. Oh, I appreciate you sharing that. And friends that are listening, we don't want you to have a lot of anxiety if you don't have a coach right now. We really don't. That's not the point of this episode. But what we do want you to do is prayerfully think through, who do I know that is fully funded that might be able to speak some wisdom into my life? Or who's the person in the organization that I'm going with that tends just to know stuff? My caution really strongly is to not speak with someone who has never been fully funded and they've just read a book about raising support. Please don't do that. You're not gonna help yourself. I've heard of people coaching others in raising support who have never raised support, and wow, don't recommend it. Strongly don't recommend it. But we do want people to be successful in being spiritually healthy, vision driven, and fully funded for the Great Commission. That's why Jenn is on the podcast with me today, because she feels the same way. And so, Jenn, thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you for speaking into this. It is a real need, and I think we did a decent job of explaining why people want to seek it out. So God bless you, my friend. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, absolutely. My privilege. Thanks so much, Aaron.
Thanks for joining us for this episode. We would love to hear your ideas for future content. Please visit supportraisingsolutions.org/feedback to share your thoughts and questions. Also, wherever you download your podcast from, be sure to subscribe for future episodes and come back each week to gain more insight into the process of building and maintaining your personal support team.